So the book is called Priorities on Purpose. As the subtitle suggests, it's a blueprint for living with clarity and focus. It's only 130 pages. I took all of the principles that I had learned over the past decade, and I reference all these people in the book, and I basically packaged it all together and developed a system of this is how I approach alignment in my own life.
Welcome to Streams to Impact, and be inspired to engage passionately in the work of your calling while achieving financial prosperity through multiple streams of high-yield returns on investment to bring your dream of making a meaningful impact to reality. I'm your host, Dr. Allen, and I am delighted that you are joining us today. If you haven't yet, get a complimentary copy of our exclusive guide, High Yield Investment Blueprint. Secure 18% plus returns in 60 days. Go to our website, highyieldblueprint.com. That is www.highyieldblueprint.com. Just provide your email address and we'll send you a copy today. Hello, enlightened investors. Welcome back to Real Estate Investing Abundance, now under the title of Streams to Impact. We're so delighted that you are with us today, and we have a very interesting guest with us today, Andrew Reichert, and he is the CEO and founder of Berggo, a Pittsburgh-based real estate firm with $336 million in assets. He's an entrepreneur, nonprofit founder, and actively involved in local communities. So we're going to look today at how we can align to thrive through real estate investing with purpose and resilience, which aligns totally and completely with our philosophy and the whole aspect of Streams to Impact. So welcome, Andrew. We're so glad that you are with us. So start off by sharing with us how it is that you have found your passion to develop your wealth and also to use your wealth to enhance not only your life, but the lives of other individuals.
Sure. Well, first of all, Ellen, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm really excited to be here. And thank you for any listeners listening in. Excited to hopefully add some value to you. So in terms of my background in real estate, I grew up at very humble beginnings and actually ended up getting accepted to college after having a bit of a tumultuous childhood prior to that. Actually I was expelled from high school prior to getting into college. And the year I graduated from college, I had been reading a ton during college, and I read this book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And it was one of those light bulb moments where I was like, oh, this is a mindset shift. This is really a mindset shift. And this is a different kind of philosophy. And so I bought into the idea of owning real estate and passive income and entrepreneurship and kind of all of the things I do today. So I actually ended up graduating and buying a duplex the year I graduated. And I bought that duplex with no money, no credit, no experience. And that was really what got me into real estate was that duplex that I bought the year I graduated from college.
Well, that's fascinating, coming from being expelled and then actually getting admitted to college. And most fascinating is, of course, with the humble beginnings and the struggles you must have had with that, coming straight out of college and purchasing a duplex with no money down, no credit, so on and so forth. So share with us a little bit about that first endeavor and how it came about and how did it turn out?
Yeah. Well, when I was in college and really didn't have much financial means, I started reading every book on no money down, how do you buy real estate with no money? And I ended up realizing that the acquisition part of real estate, when you look for the deal to acquire, was just so important. If you found a good deal, you could almost certainly get it financed. And so I just kind of cut myself loose on, hey, what's a really good deal? And so at the time it was, I bought a property for $105,000. It appraised for $140,000. So I knew I was getting a good deal on it. And what I did is I went to the bank and I said, hey, I'd like to close on both a first and a second loan at the same time. Now, this was before the great financial crisis of 2008 and 2009. So you can't do that stuff today. And that's in part why the banks got themselves into trouble. But, I found a bank that said, yeah, we'll do that. We'll finance over 100% of the purchase price. And I actually walked away from closing with a check for 20 grand, which is, again, just stuff you can't do today, but really helped me get my start in real estate.
So how did the project turn out?
Great. Yeah. I mean, that particular investment turned out fantastic. I actually ended up taking that check for 20 grand that I walked away from closing and bought another unit with that. And then I refinanced that, bought another unit with that, refinanced that. So I actually ended up getting to the place where I had 20 units. Oh, wow. And so I was still working a full-time job at the time, had a great job with a regional bank here in Pittsburgh. And as I started to assemble my portfolio, I knew I was being called into real estate. I felt this tug that I just couldn't let go. And so all of those investments did really well. They were small, so they're not huge, life-changing investments, but they got me the experience is really what I am grateful for today. That allowed me to, in 2012, resign from, my full-time job and kind of go all in on real estate.
Yeah. Well, fascinating. And that's the way, a lot of people start. Many people don't have those same kind of positive experiences, but I'm glad that you did. So how has your upbringing and life experiences shaped your approach to leadership and to entrepreneur?
That is a great question. So, I found that life is just full of adversity. So that was no surprise to me. I had some adversity through getting expelled from high school, but really that adversity didn't stop once I started investing in real estate. In fact, a couple of years into investing in real estate, I found myself actually, after a bit of a reckless evening and some bad decisions, I found myself actually locked up in a holding cell in Manhattan. And then a couple years after that, I got married and I actually found myself diagnosed with cancer. And so, I'm 30 years old and a newlywed in my first year of marriage, and I'm being told that we might not be able to have children, and I've got this life-threatening disease. And so, my approach to, you asked about leadership and entrepreneurship and just kind of life in general is that you kind of have to have a system that's holding you together, that's aligning, your life with your key priorities, and that helps you to develop a life that when you look back, you're going to say, you know what, that was worth it. And, I spent my time on the things that mattered to me. And so having a life-threatening illness, although I wouldn't have asked for it, I actually today look back and I say I'm grateful for it because it gave me that perspective and allowed me to really think about a life that is marked with both aligning my life to my purpose and myself, and then also resilience, building some of that resilience that I think is important to deal with adversity.
Well, if you don't mind, Andrew, telling us about your personal alignment with your leadership style and your passions.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my job is I'm CEO of a private equity real estate company. So we've got 100 employees, And our mission is improving lives through real estate. And so for me, real estate has always just been a means to an end. I always tell our team, I'm like, hey, we're not in the bricks and mortar business. We're in the people business. And it's about the lives that we impact along the way. So I wake up every morning excited to impact people's lives. That's really my purpose. That's my why. And that's my alignment. And so the way that lives itself out is I've got 100 employees that I get to steward day in and day out. And we developed a personal development program that's actually in the book that I just put out. So we developed that for our team. We've been teaching it to them for the past 2 years. And then I packaged it into a book and just published that late last year. So that's how we get to improve the lives of our employees. But then we have our residents, 3,600 residents, 3,600 families, really, a little bit closer to about 5,000 total people that we get to steward day in and day out just by loving on them and showing them what it is to be a good landlord and provide good, dignified housing is kind of how I look at that. And then we steward investor capital. So we've raised $125 million across 250 accredited investors. And so I often think about improving their lives by stewarding their capital well, providing good return on investment. So that really is my alignment. That's my purpose. That's what I wake up day in and day out getting excited to do.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That is an excellent example of aligning your aspirations with your entrepreneurial experiences. And it's important to make a living and to make money. And certainly that's part of what you're doing. But the really big why, the really big purpose there is helping others to find their own meaning and purpose and to strengthen their own financial well-being as well. You had mentioned your book, Andrew, so tell us what is the title of your book and tell us just a little bit more about the book.
Yeah, sure. So the book is called Priorities on Purpose, and it's really, as the subtitle suggests, it's a blueprint for living with clarity and focus. So it's a small book. It's only 130 pages. And what I did is I took all of the principles that I had learned over the past decade, and I reference all these people in the book. And I basically packaged it all together and developed a system of this is how I approach alignment in my own life. And if you're familiar with EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, we run our company on EOS. So I always tell people you need an operating system for your business, and that's what we run our business on. But you really also need an operating system for your life. And this is what I run my life on. This is what I recommend and teach to our employees to run their lives on. And so all we did is we packaged that together into a book and put it out for the public to consume.
Well, tell us a little bit about your methods and procedures for motivating and empowering your team. You've talked about how it is that it's important for everyone on the team to reach their full potential. So what are some of the things you do to motivate that?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, there's these 5 components to the system. And the first component is the who component. And so I believe that it starts with who. You might have heard Simon Sinek say, start with why. I actually think there's a step before why, which is who, which is for our team members and really for anybody. I think it's all about understanding your unique DNA. Never before been created, never again going to be created. What makes Allen so unique? What makes Andrew so unique? What makes each and every one of your listeners so unique? And that's what I think it starts with. So for our employees, we do a bunch of assessments. You mentioned motivation. We do a motivational assessment called the M Code. We do a behavioral assessment called the Predictive Index, and we do a strengths assessment called Gallup Strengths. So those 3 data points are an incredible start for us to understand their who and for them to understand themselves. And it's from there that you can then start to discover your why, which is the second component. And your who and your why should really inform your what. So many people just start with, okay, you ask somebody, you're at a cocktail reception. It's like, what do you do? Right? Like, it's one of the first questions. And that's almost the definition of their identity, is like, what do you do? So we always tell people the what cannot even be clarified until you really are clear on the who and the why. And then after the what, it's the how and the when, which are all about executions of rhythms of execution, and then energy as well, kind of making sure that the whole system is working together.
So I can see how that is important on an individual level, and how overall that is important to operations of the business. So how do you tie the who, why, what, how, and when from that personal level to the organizational level?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, there's a couple answers there. First is, at an individual level, we believe that the best thing we can do for an organization is to actually have really engaged employees. And so we have all of those components at the organizational level. So we have a mission, we have vision, we have values, we have all that stuff. But it really starts with understanding the employees and getting them really motivated and bought into their own unique vision for their life. And then that then connects to the vision for our organization. And so it helps with, employee retention, because we're able to, people want to be here. We're able to retain good employees. It helps with employee recruiting. People know about this system that we do, and they're like, oh, that sounds like the kind of organization that I would want to work for. And so, it's really the system and the business goals are tied directly by helping people live into their unique DNA and their why and their what. We help the organization thrive as well.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. Interesting how you weave all of that together, and how really, actually, it all really does always come back to the individual aligning with their own who, why, what, and how, and when, and then that just pretty much automatically weaves into coordinating that with the overall structure of the organization. Well, what inspired you to start Birgo Realty, and what kind of processes did you have to go to launch and grow the company?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think there's been a few iterations of kind of answering that question. So, the first leap of faith was leaving a great full-time job when I had 20 units under management to go out and try and figure this thing out. So that's what I did in 2012. And that was really what I would say felt like a calling. It was like, I knew that I could stay in my corporate job, and I was passionate about it and even proficient at it, but it didn't align with my purpose. And so, what I like to think of as convergence of those three is what we tell people is your what component should really be all about. It's all about the combination of what you're passionate about, you're proficient in, and your purpose. And the intersection of that is convergence. That's what we want people to be chasing after. So the first leap of faith was chasing after convergence. I had that purpose piece just missing. I was passionate, I was proficient, but didn't align with my purpose. Then when I started the company, we're doing a little bit of everything. So I'm doing ground up new construction of townhomes, renovating historic units. I'm doing third-party property management of commercial properties. I'm buying multifamily. I'm buying commercial. I'm renovating, tenant fit outs in commercial. I mean, I'm doing literally everything. And even me, myself, in the company, I'm doing tons of roles. I'm like doing accounting and property management and leasing and maintenance. And so, now all of a sudden I've left to pursue my purpose, but I'm no longer passionate and proficient at each of those things, right? So now I've got one of the three components. And so over time, I've had to just continue to iterate. We've had to cut out everything else. We only do one thing today. We acquire multifamily assets in Rust Belt cities, heartland cities, between 50 to 150 units typically. And they're workforce housing units. Again, back in the day, we might have done more Class C or more Class A. Right now, it's just, hey, we're a Class B buyer and operator. And it just is a lot of iterations to get there. But I found myself into a convergence as a person and convergence as an organization.
Well, that clarifies a lot of things, in particular with what you're talking about in convergent. It also illustrates, I think, what a lot of entrepreneurs go through, that they start their businesses and they're just into everything. And it's hard to see what's going on with all of that. There's just a whole lot of really chaos and confusion, and difficult to really start moving things forward. So how did you come to the point in the realization that something needed to change, that there needed to be a focus rather than this shotgun approach?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think there was a couple things. One is it was starting to lead to burnout. And so one of the things that I've learned is that burnout is a symptom of an underlying misalignment. And so I started to feel personal burnout. Our organization was starting to feel burned out. And I was starting to have these physical manifestations of burnout, like, the eye twitching and the tension in my shoulders. And, I would honestly be kind of shaky from time to time, and just irritable and not sleeping well. And I've got 3 daughters at home, so I found myself getting home and not having the energy to be with them, and I would find myself snapping at them. And it's just like all of those things were kind of like, okay, something's very wrong here. And then we sort of took a look at the organization. We said, okay, well, we're trying to do too much. We're trying to do way too much. And so that was really the springboard for us, saying, okay, what can we be the best in the world at? What's our differentiator? What's our unique selling proposition? And really trying to focus in on that. And then once we figured that out as an organization, then it's the question of, okay, what is my role here? And so in 2022, I took a sabbatical, a 1-month long sabbatical, took an entire month off, no work, not connected to anything. And that was when I started to ask myself those questions. So, sitting down with my own who and my own why, and it's like, okay, what should I be doing? And then finding people around me, building a team around me to do the rest.
Well, a big transition there, for sure.
Yeah.
So how did you manage that transition from this gunshot approach to going to a specific focus? What did you have to go through, and what did the organization have to go through?
Yeah. It's interesting because I think if you look at us as an organization, it almost looks like it was linear in terms of our growth. But the reality is it's much more like a roller coaster if you look under the hood. And I think anytime you're choosing to go through that kind of a transition, you're entering into a bit of a crucible, and you're really entering into a season of challenge and difficulty. And so, we're basically deciding to cut off revenue streams. Mm-hmm. And so that's scary, and certainly going to have an impact on the financial wherewithal of the organization. And certainly on my own, near-term stress levels as well. I think they probably spiked a little bit in the near term. But then if you just look at the big picture in mind, where are we headed? The idea is, okay, well, we've got to do this. We want to be around for, the next 20, 30, 50 years. And therefore we've got to make the right changes to be a long-term sustainable organization.
Well, I'm interested in I mean, you could have made two decisions at that point in time. You could have gone down the trail that you went down, which was the reduction and the specific focus there. You could have gone down the route of expanding and developing departments so that you were actually delegating more at the same time that you were building a much larger company. And you chose the reduction rather than going big. What was the deciding factor in doing that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And there's no one way to skin the cat. And I think, what works for us isn't necessarily prescriptive of what'll work for other folks. And I certainly don't purport myself to be an expert on this either. From my standpoint, it was that we had to pick the area that we could get really good at. Because my sense was that we were somewhat mediocre at all of those things. So pick one area that we could get really good at. And then from there, we could always build out those other departments, those other service lines. We could become more vertically integrated. We could buy a maintenance company, there's a lot of stuff we could do. But I think it starts with just getting really good at the main core business and defining that main core business. And that's what it was for us. And then from there are other opportunities to build out other service lines, other revenue streams, things like that.
Yeah. And build from a quality base to start with.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, what are some of the key lessons you've actually learned about scaling a business? And while essentially at the same time you were cutting back and focusing, you were still looking at growth. So what are some of the key lessons you've learned from all that?
Oh, man, so many lessons. Most of which I've just learned from doing it wrong. Honestly, we learned every lesson the hard way, which is just doing it wrong and then making changes. Some of the key lessons are the importance of the right people in the right seats. I know that sounds super cliche and it's not new information, but I think we maybe weren't in the early days quite as rigorous around removing people when they're not the right person in the right seat. I think we wanted to be gracious to people, but I think it was at the expense of the organization at times. I would say also the importance of specialization, both as an individual and as an organization. And I've already talked a lot about that, but specializing as an organization in one thing, but then also I need to know what are my strengths. I actually have my Strengths Finder mug, and we give these to everybody in our organization to say, okay, what are my strengths? What am I really good at? And making sure that I'm just doing those things. And then the stuff that I'm not really good at, you got to find a way to, what we say is eliminate, automate, delegate, or coordinate. So finding a way to get that stuff done without me involved is really the important approach to make sure that I'm specialized in what I'm good at. And just from an operations standpoint, financials really, really matter, and cash flow really, really matters. There's some things that I learned through the years that I wish I'd have hired a CFO earlier. Wish I'd have hired. It's not my skill set, so wish I'd have hired a really good underwriter earlier. We've got a great CFO now. We've got a great underwriter, but wow, having those 10 years ago would have been amazing. I think also I've heard it before, the principle of 10 or something. It's like every time you do a leap of 10, you have to kind of break everything and rebuild it. So another thing I've just learned is, going from 0 to 10 employees required a total transition and shift from 10 to 100 employees. Again, just another break, another transition and shift. Just what we did before won't work then. The people that got us there won't get us to the next step. It's just you kind of have to break everything and rebuild it. So those are some of the key lessons I would mention.
Well, I got two more questions. One question is, you had mentioned eliminating individuals, and that you were too conscientious of the effect upon the individuals being eliminated at the expense of the organization. I mean, for me, that's an extraordinarily difficult thing to do. I mean, even people who it was obvious from the beginning that this just wasn't going to work, and so didn't have a long-standing relationship with them, but letting somebody go, even after they'd been with me for 2 or 3 weeks, is a painful experience. How do you manage that? How did you personally come to terms with having to do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll be honest, I'm still not that good at it. The first thing I did, so we run on EOS, as I mentioned earlier, and so in the EOS system, the CEO, they call the visionary, and then the COO, they call the integrator. And they recommend that the leadership team actually reports to the COO or the integrator. So the first thing I did is get myself out of that seat, like hire a good integrator, hire a good second in command, and let them build the team and let them get rid of the people that don't work. Now, granted, I wanted to hire somebody who's going to do that in an empathetic way, in a loving way, just because of our DNA as an organization, who's going to do that in a way that reflects our core values. But at the same time, they're going to do it, right? Like they're going to make the changes and make the shifts. That was one thing I've done. The other thing that I've done is I've just had to come to grips with really understanding the impact of that employee who needs to go on the rest of the organization. So like the other individuals that are picking up the slack for that person, are investors who were stewarding their capital, right? Like I had to come to grips with, okay, as much as I love this one person, they cannot be the reason that investor returns suffer or other employees suffer or residents suffer. That is much worse than removing this person. And by the way, our investor returns have been great. We've been net to investors over 15% over the past decade. So our investors are very happy with us. But I didn't want it to be, I didn't want it to be the situation where that starts to change, where those investor returns start to change and the employee morale starts to go down. I wanted to get in front of it.
Yeah. That's essentially how I have dealt with it in the past. And what's this person doing to the morale of everyone else? What are they doing to the organization? It's still difficult to do that. In fact, looking back on the few times I've had to do it, it's still very painful because, I like those people, I enjoyed those people, and I didn't wish them any kind of ill, but, it just wasn't working for the organization.
Yeah.
Well, one last question, Andrew, and I used to ask this question routinely. I haven't asked it in a long time, but I'm going to ask you this question. So you've come to the end of your life, and you're looking back on your life. What is it that you want what do you want to have said on your tombstone?
That's a great question, and fortunately one that I've thought about a lot, mainly just as a function of having that near-death experience earlier in life, but also as a function of I put a whole book together on purpose. So I have this thing called a life plan that I've got to give credit to Michael Hyatt and his book Living Forward that he co-authored. That's where I got the system from, and it starts with writing your own eulogy. And so I've written this eulogy from the perspective of my children, from the perspective of my spouse. And so it's very long. And I was like, you know what? How can I get this really big life plan and life vision boiled down into 3 words? So in my mirror, every morning I wake up, I've got this little vision board and there's 3 words on it. And those 3 words are love, serve, give. And I've just realized that everything that my life plan articulates, it's 14 pages, I think, if you print it out, is really all about loving, serving, and giving. And so that's really, if I was going to put 3 words on my tombstone, hopefully it's that Andrew loved, served, and gave with all his heart everything that he has.
Well, Andrew, it's been a real pleasure having you. Priceless insights you have shared with us, and thank you for not only sharing those entrepreneurial insights, but thank you for sharing a portion of your life with us. It's really been a pleasure having you today. So, enlightened investors, thank you so much for being with us again today. And if you've enjoyed the show, which I'm sure you have, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. And also take a moment to go over to your favorite podcast app and leave us a rating and a review. Until next time, live abundantly in all areas of your life, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks, Allen.
Thank you for tuning into Streams to Impact, brought to you by Steed Talker Capital, a company empowering passionate professionals like you to develop multiple streams of passive income built on solid passive real estate investments. As a significant part of our endeavors to make a cosmic and meaningful impact for this world, Steed Talker Capital contributes significant portions of our profits to activities and organizations committed to better understanding the equine. These endeavors attempt to enhance the treatment of horses worldwide. Steed Talker Capital, working for a world where all creatures great and small flourish abundantly. If you are ready to learn how our passive investors have earned an average 33% annual return on their investments, schedule your complimentary passive income to Prideful Impact consultation. Obviously, we cannot continue indefinitely to offer these valuable consultations for free, so grab your passive income to Prideful Impact consultation while you still can. Go to steedtalker.com/passive